Picture this. You pull into the parking lot at work, and 3 spots down, some guy's climbing out of a brand new truck, the kind with a price tag that makes your stomach twist a little. You glance over at your own car. It's fine. It runs. It gets you where you need to go. But for a second, just a second, something creeps in. Embarrassment, maybe. Or some flavor of shame you didn't even realize you'd been dragging around. Here's the strange part, though. That guy in the truck, statistically speaking, there's a decent chance he's more broke than you are. Not less. More. And the people who actually have money, real money, the kind that doesn't evaporate the moment a paycheck shows up late, a lot of them figured this out years ago. They learned how to look poor. Or maybe look poor isn't quite right. They learned how to stop trying to look like anything at all. That idea is going to sound completely backwards for the next few minutes. Stick with me anyway. By the end, it's going to make a strange kind of sense. Here's what almost nobody tells you growing up in America. The entire visual language of success you absorbed before you were even old enough to question it. The new car. The big house. The vacations posted in real time. None of that was ever designed to show you who's actually wealthy. It was designed to sell you something. Car commercials don't come with someone's net worth in the corner of the screen. Real estate listings don't include a balance sheet. So your brain, which is scary good at pattern matching, did what it always does. It built a shortcut. New stuff equals money. Money equals success. Success equals worth as a person. It's not a dumb shortcut either. It's actually pretty efficient. The problem is, it's wrong just as often as it's right. And look, this isn't a personal failing. I want to be really clear about that, because a lot of financial content quietly blames people for falling into this. Like everyone should have just known better. You didn't choose to grow up surrounded by advertising that's been refined for 100 years. To make you associate spending with identity. Nobody ever sat you down and explained that the guy with 3 maxed-out credit cards and a luxury SUV in the driveway is, financially speaking, in worse shape than the woman next door, driving a 12-year-old Camry with a retirement account that's fully funded. You were never shown the inside of anyone's bank account. You were only ever shown the outside of their life. And the outside of someone's life, it tells you almost nothing about what's actually happening underneath it. So if you've ever felt behind, like everyone around you is doing better, buying more, living bigger, sit with this for a second. You've been comparing your real financial life to other people's marketing. That's not a fair fight. It was never supposed to be. Let's get into why this happens. Because once you see the mechanics, you can't really unsee them. Back in the late 1990s, a researcher named Thomas Stanley spent years studying actual American millionaires, not celebrities, not people who looked rich, but people who genuinely had a net worth north of $1 million. And what he found blew up almost every assumption people had. Most of them didn't drive new cars. A huge chunk bought their vehicles used and drove them into the ground. Most didn't live in flashy neighborhoods either. They were still in the same modest house they'd bought decades earlier, often in towns nobody would ever associate with serious money. Pass a lot of these people in a grocery store, and you wouldn't look twice. Meanwhile, the people in the most expensive-looking homes, driving the newest cars, wearing every visible marker of wealth. A lot of them were leveraged right up to the edge. High income? Sure, but high income isn't wealth. Wealth is what's left over after the spending. Income is just what passes through your hands on its way to somewhere else. That distinction sounds simple. It's also the one most people never fully get. Because spending feels like proof. If I'm making good money, shouldn't I have something to show for it? That feeling is so human. And it's exactly where things start to go sideways. There's a story, a few hundred years old now, about a philosopher named Diderot. Modest guy. Didn't have much. One day, someone gave him a beautiful, expensive dressing robe as a gift. A gorgeous thing. Way nicer than anything else he owned. And almost overnight, everything he already had started to look wrong next to it. His writing desk suddenly looked shabby beside the new robe. So he replaced the desk. Then the chairs looked out of place next to the new desk, so those went too. Then the walls looked tired. He kept going, piece by piece, until he'd quietly spent himself into debt, all because of one nice robe that made everything around it look cheap by comparison. Economists still call this the Diderot Effect. And if you've ever bought one nice thing and suddenly felt like everything else needed an upgrade to match, a new couch making the rest of the living room look dated, a nicer car making your wardrobe feel embarrassing. Congratulations, you've lived this exact pattern. It's not a coincidence. It's not weak willpower. It's a documented psychological chain reaction, and marketers have understood it for decades, even if they never call it by name. Now stack something else on top of that. There's a concept in economics called a Veblen good, named after economist Thorstein Veblen, who noticed something that broke one of the most basic rules in the field. Normally, when something gets more expensive, people want less of it. But with certain luxury goods, it works backwards. The higher the price, the more people want it, not in spite of the cost, because of it. Why would that be true? Because the price isn't really paying for the object anymore. It's paying for what the object signals. A $50 watch and a $50,000 watch tell the same time with the same accuracy. That $50,000 version isn't selling time. It's selling a message to everyone watching. I have enough money that spending this much doesn't hurt me. That's called costly signaling. And once you know to look for it, it's everywhere. The promotion that suddenly has you feeling like you need a bigger house to match it. The wedding that costs 3 times what the couple can actually afford, because somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the marriage and started being about what the photos would say to people who weren't even there. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you, though. Researchers who study status and consumer behavior have found something almost backwards from what you'd expect. It's often the people who feel least secure about their standing who spend the hardest to broadcast it. Confidence doesn't usually need an audience. Insecurity does. The flashiest signals often come from the shakiest financial ground, because the spending isn't funding a lifestyle. It's funding a feeling, a temporary, expensive feeling of, I matter. Look at me. One that fades the second the new wears off, and the new always wears off. There's a well-known finding in psychology, going back to a study from the late 1970s that compared recent lottery winners to people who'd survived serious accidents. You'd expect the lottery winners to be permanently happier and the accident survivors permanently worse off. But within about a year, both groups had drifted back close to where they started. The windfall didn't stick. In most cases, neither did the hardship. Humans adapt. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. You run and run, acquiring more, and the scenery never actually changes, because your sense of enough keeps moving the goalpost right along with you. This is the part nobody puts in the glossy version of this conversation. The new car feels incredible for about 6 weeks. Then it's just your car. The bigger house feels like an accomplishment for a season. Then it's just where you keep your stuff, and you're already eyeing the neighbor's renovation. You're not weak for feeling this. You're wired this way. Everyone is. Now add one more piece, because this is where it gets a little dark, in an honest way. Status spending creates what people sometimes call a Red Queen race, after the character in Through the Looking Glass who has to run constantly just to stay in the same place. Your neighbor upgrades their kitchen, so you upgrade yours to keep pace. Then they upgrade their car, so you follow. Nobody's actual position changes. You're both spending more, working more hours to afford it, feeling more pressure, and at the end of the race, the gap between you is exactly the same as when you started. Nobody won. Everybody's just more tired and more in debt. This is the quiet machinery running underneath so much of American consumer life. It's not that people are bad with money. It's that an enormous, well-funded system is built around making looking successful feel urgent, and being financially secure feel boring and invisible by comparison. Boring doesn't sell trucks. Invisible doesn't get likes. There's actually a cultural shift happening around this right now, and it's kind of fascinating to watch in real time. A few years back, There was a trend online called loud budgeting, people proudly announcing they weren't going to spend on things they couldn't afford, almost performing their restraint out loud. And alongside it, there's been a quiet resurgence of what people call stealth wealth, dressing plainly, driving modestly, saying nothing about your finances at all, letting the actual numbers do their work in private. Both trends, oddly enough, are reactions to the exact same exhaustion. People are tired of the performance. They just haven't fully agreed on whether the answer is to perform the opposite or to stop performing altogether. I'd argue it's the second one. Here's the shift, and it's a small one, but it changes almost everything downstream of it. Money was never supposed to be about being seen. It was supposed to be about being free. Once that flips in your head, the whole equation changes. You stop asking, what does this purchase say about me to other people? And start asking, what does this purchase actually do for my life? Those are wildly different questions, and a lot of the time, they have completely different answers. For the exact same item, a nicer car impresses your coworkers for about 2 weeks. A fully funded emergency fund impresses nobody and quietly removes a whole category of fear from your life. One's loud and temporary, the other's silent and permanent. And most people, without ever consciously deciding to, have spent years optimizing for the loud one. There's an old idea, sometimes called the internal scorecard versus the external scorecard, and it really just comes down to this. Are you keeping score based on what other people think of you, or based on what you actually think of your own progress? The people who build real, lasting financial security are almost always running on the internal scorecard. They're not trying to win some visible competition. They're trying to build a life where money stops being a source of dread. And here's the strange gift hidden inside looking poor, or more gently put, looking unremarkable. When you're not performing well, you're not on anyone's radar for it either. Nobody's watching to see if you keep up. You're free to make quiet, boring, unglamorous decisions. Drive the car another 4 years, cook at home most nights, skip the renovation, without an audience grading you on it. The privacy itself is the relief. You get to actually live your life instead of the broadcast version of it. Now, this doesn't mean never enjoying money. That's not the lesson here. And honestly, anyone telling you to live like a monk while sitting on a healthy income is selling you a different kind of performance. The performance of austerity instead of the performance of luxury. Both are still performances. The goal isn't deprivation. The goal is alignment. Spending in a way that actually matches what you value instead of what you think you're supposed to be seen valuing. So, what does this actually look like day to day? Nothing extreme. Nothing that requires you to swear off nice things forever. Start by catching the Diderot chain before it even starts. When you buy one nicer thing, pay attention to that flicker of, now everything else looks wrong. That flicker is information. But it's not a signal that you need to upgrade everything around it. It's a signal that the comparison machine in your brain just switched on. Notice it. Let it pass. Same way you'd notice you're hungry at the movies, even though you just ate dinner an hour ago. Give bigger purchases some breathing room before you commit, especially the ones that seem to have been triggered by something you just saw someone else have. Not because waiting is some magic trick, but because the emotional charge behind status purchases fades fast. And what's left, once it fades, is a much clearer picture of whether you actually wanted the thing or just wanted the feeling it was attached to. Keep your net worth and your visible lifestyle on 2 separate tracks. Let your savings and investments grow in private, completely unannounced, while your day-to-day spending stays modest and steady. Nobody needs a press release about your retirement account. The quiet compounding happening in the background is doing more for your future than any visible upgrade ever will. And it's doing it with zero audience. If you're going to spend on something with a status element to it, and honestly, that's completely human. Nothing wrong with wanting nice things. Try spending on it after the financial foundation is solid, not instead of it. A nice dinner out funded by a healthy savings rate feels completely different than one funded by anxiety about next month's rent. even if the receipt looks identical. And maybe the simplest shift of all, get curious instead of competitive when envy starts creeping in. When somebody's new purchase gets under your skin a little, ask what it's actually pointing at. Sometimes, it's pointing at a real gap you want to close. But often, if you're honest with yourself, it's pointing at a feeling you're chasing, one the purchase wouldn't have actually delivered anyway. None of this requires extreme frugality or pretending you don't enjoy nice things. It just requires noticing who you're actually spending for. The version of you that has to live with the bank account afterward, or the version of you performing for an audience that's mostly too busy worrying about their own image to be grading yours in the first place. If there's one thing I want you to leave with, it's this. You were never actually behind. You were comparing your real life to everyone else's highlight reel. And that was never a fair comparison to begin with. The people who quietly build real security, the kind that lets them sleep at night, that lets them say no to a bad job without panicking, that lets them handle an emergency without it turning into a crisis. Most of them aren't the ones you'd point to on the street. They look ordinary. They drive ordinary cars. They live in ordinary houses. And underneath that unremarkable surface, they've built something most people spend their whole lives chasing the appearance of instead. You don't have to perform wealth to eventually have it. You don't have to announce your progress for it to be real. The version of you a few years from now, with a little more breathing room, a little less financial dread, isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built in 100 small, quiet, completely unphotographed decisions that nobody else will ever know you made. That's not a consolation prize. That's actually the whole point. So if today all you do is notice the next flicker of, I should have more to show, and let it pass without acting on it, that's not failure. That's not falling behind. That's progress. And progress, every single time, beats perfection. So that's it for the video. And I am Sophia. And if you want to save your hard-earned money and get rich, make sure you subscribe to the channel.